So we have been watching a lot of British lifestyle stuff recently, and I will tell you why. Because I have noticed personally when I watch something that is really emotive or violent or something, I can't get it out of my mind. Like I will, it'll run in the back of my mind and I dream about it. Like, do you find that?
Not normally.
Okay, so it's just me.
I can switch that off relatively well, but it does.
Okay, so look at
You
all
tell
right.
the
So
rest of
I'll
that
tell
bit.
the rest of that. So heaps of people have been watching the Jeffrey Dahmer a little while ago. Everyone was watching that Jeffrey Dahmer thing on Netflix, right? And we just watched the trailer of it, and I had to get you to turn the trailer
Oh
off
God, no.
midway. Like it was really like I felt a physical response for me. Like my heart was racing, and I felt sick. And you know what? It got me to thinking that as humans, we live in an incredibly safe world, right? So we're not really chased by a tiger. We're not really experiencing that level of fight or flight that we kind of should be.
Yeah, but we kind of make up for it by always being stressed.
Yeah, but
Like instead of like 5 minute intervals, it's constant stress.
yeah, and
But
that's like a really
that's
different.
different.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
a really
different.
different
It's
type of stress. Like that is a chronic stress response with a chronic high level of cortisol that is, and we've talked about that in various different things about what that does to your
and
system.
we'll talk about it
And we'll
again.
talk about it again. But what I'm talking about is that the body is designed to have really high stress levels of cortisol for very short
You
periods
mean
of
moments
time.
of sheer terror?
Exactly, moments of sheer terror. We should actually be having that because, like a bunny caught in the headlights. And because we're not getting that, we search for it.
To a point. So you had dreams about
Yeah, I
a
had
show that we
some.
watched.
Yeah, that was, yeah, no.
So we watched a show called Cleo on Netflix, which is about an Eastern European
I
like
don't know how relevant
political
this really is,
like
but pretty much
but
part
she
of
ended
it.
up burying bodies under cement in the backyard.
And so that was my dream, that I was trying to, that our family were killing people and trying to bury people under cement. And I was so into it and really really worried about how we were going to get these bodies under the cement. Like no one needs that kind of stress. But yeah, what I find is just really fascinating is that with what we consume, we are now looking for terror because we don't get terror in our lives. So I actually think that there are healthy ways to do this that don't impact our subconscious. Because here's the problem, right? When we were kids, okay, we didn't see this sort of stuff. Like we just didn't have this kind of stuff on Netflix. We didn't see this kind of overt and gaming and things, like this overt violence and stuff.
Like Squid Games and
Yeah, like that was also fairly traumatic. And the interesting thing is that when we keep seeing this sort of stuff, it's a phenomenon called habituation, which is that the more you get a stimulus, the more it becomes normal to you.
which is where addiction kicks in and why people who are say addicted to heroin they need bigger and bigger doses to get the same high.
Right, because our body is not designed, and this is the same with happiness, we're not designed to feel like we're playing with a puppy all the time. And if you have really high levels of serotonin and oxytocin, which are like happy, good hormones, the body just goes, cool, that's my new normal, and you are going to need more and more and more. So it's really fascinating because we have a double-edged sword, I believe, in our world, in that A, we don't have moments of sheer terror where we are like running away from something like a tiger or something,
Because we
right?
are actually genuinely safer now than we have ever been in the course of human history.
Exactly. So we've got that point where we're not having those lows and those highs and those like, big fluctuations.
Yep.
So we do have, but then we also have like low levels of chronic stress. So not only are we not having that base level of like, hey, everything's fine and nothing's going on, we don't have that big bandwidth, which we should have for our hormones. We have this like very small bandwidth, but it's higher. That stress point is higher, and we're actually just kind of very, very close to being stressed all the time. But we do crave the bandwidth. So
Yeah, we crave the variation, right?
exactly. I mean, the body.
Variety is the spice of life.
Yeah, but the body will also crave it because that's how we're wired.
Yeah.
We are actually wired to homeostasis is bringing you back to normal, right? And our normal set point is not that normal lower set point where everything's just calm and happy, our normal set point's actually really, really high,
Yeah.
full of stress and full of cortisol. So yeah, I think that that's a really big problem. So there are so back to what I was saying, there is a way, I think healthy ways that you can get that high stress point. So like things like lifting weights will do it to you.
Yeah. Definitely. Cold exposure, heat exposure, so sauna and ice baths.
Extremes of heat, those things will do it to you. Both of those things are really good for you. Also doing things mentally that are difficult for you. We went axe throwing the other day. Now that's something that is amazingly good for both your brain and your hormones, because what it does is it's a bit dangerous, but being a bit dangerous means that you can actually, your conscious mind can come into it and go, yeah, this is a bit dangerous, but ooh, it's a bit new, and it's feeds
novel.
you. Yeah.
So there's the learning of a new skill.
Yeah, and novel.
So I had the same thing with archery last year. Archery is an amazing sport, and part of the thrill is actually learning how to make it work, because it's not just chuck an arrow on a bow and you'll aim somewhere and hopefully get it. There's an actual system to it, and once you start putting it together, you can hear it in my voice maybe, it's addictive, and it's actually quite exciting to when you figure out the next thing that makes it better.
Yeah, so novel experiences are incredibly important for your nervous system and incredibly important for your stress response. And this will stop you from looking for trauma responses and things that are traumatic to get that response, because we are all so tired and all wired that everyone's seen the memes of like, oh, I relax by watching a serial killer documentary. It's like, that's actually not normal, and it's incredibly traumatic to our system to be watching those sorts of things.
And it becomes that habituation thing. So if you're constantly stimulated, constantly stressed, you need something bigger to float your boat, right? Whereas if you are generally calmer, one little thing, one blip, makes more of a difference, more of an impact for your body. And it's like, ooh, yeah, I liked that.
Yeah, it means that we are able to handle stressful situations a lot better because we are not looking to be stimulated like that. We're not looking for the stress. We're not like, oh my God, my system really needs the stress
Even
response.
more.
And the funny thing is, the stress response, the reason why us humans like it is because it will drive evolution. So the stress response in small doses will drive our evolution, because think about it. The people who ran away and had a higher stress response. Now, this is another actually interesting point, which I'm going to sidebarring, but our ancestors who were able to have a higher stress response, they survived. So the people who are a bit more calm, they would have been picking flowers and been eaten by a tiger, a bear, a crocodile. Whereas the ones who are a little bit more like, oh my God, I am on high alert, they're the ones that survived. So we are naturally wired because of evolution to be a bit more stressy.
A little bit cautious.
A little bit more cautious. So stress drives evolution, which is why as humans we look for stressful situations. But the problem is, in our life, we are very, very safe. And so we have chronic stress that we have made up ourselves, like answering the phone or replying to an email. None of those things are good stresses. Those stresses will not drive evolution. The stresses that will drive evolution, however, are things like your novel experiences, like trying a new skill like archery or axe throwing, or lifting weights, or perhaps doing some, puzzles. But we want healthy stress responses and not traumatic ones.
So the interesting contrast here is that you want to reduce your overall stress, like your baseline stress. You want to have that more under control, but then give yourself more blips. So,
exactly.
Back to us watching British lifestyle TV, which is very, very vanilla.
Oh, I love it though. I don't have any dreams.
But yeah, it doesn't seep across into the rest of our lives going, oh my God, I can't stop thinking about that because it was so stressful.
Exactly. And
I mentioned it to a client yesterday, and they watch all of the gory horror movies. They just can't get enough.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, yeah, that was me, but not anymore.
Yeah, and that's
But
a
I
sign.
feel generally calmer,
Yeah.
but I get my kicks a lot more easily as well.
Because that is a sign of a dysregulated nervous system.
Exactly.
You know, someone who cannot get enough of watching trauma on a screen, that is a dysregulated nervous system. And they will find it much harder to meditate. They will find it much harder to be calmer, and it'll prime their nervous system for stress in their environment.
Which, as we all know, constant chronic stress leads to heart disease and cancer and diabetes and all of the negative things.
And I mean, that is a whole other podcast episode or a whole other
thing.
PDF that we will be releasing very soon. But thank you so much for joining us today on All the Ways We Heal. Goodbye.